Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Multifamily Talks. I'm your host, Krista Hurley, and today we're diving into a topic that's shaping the future of our industry, smart building technology. It's a present day necessity for operators who want to stay competitive while also meeting resident expectations. Multifamily Talks Live is a live video series you can expect monthly, talking about all things multifamily here on LinkedIn. Think live, candid conversations in a more bite sized format. And if you can't tune in, no worries. You can watch or listen to the replay using the link below or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And make sure to follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss out on any new conversations. And please don't forget, ask any questions in the comments to keep the conversation going with our guest speaker. I'm thrilled to be joined by Dennis Kyle, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Smart Building here at RealPage. Dennis is a true industry leader who's driving innovation in how properties operate, connect, and deliver value. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I sure can. I actually am less than a year old at RealPage. I come from a background steeped in telecommunications with companies like Level 3, Lumen, Zayo, and then a number of IoT companies as well, like Tendril, Uplight, and Arand. Between all those companies, call it 20, 25 years in the business. And most recently was actually with a fiber to the premise company, whose one of the main routes to market was multifamily, right? And that's how I got connected up with RealPage. Besides
Wonderful.
that, I like skiing and golfing and the like, right? So
Love that. I love that. A lot of those names I actually am gonna be real honest here, I've never heard of them. So I
yeah,
know that
yeah,
I'm sure you bring a lot of expertise in the telecommunications world, and you've brought a lot to RealPage already. So we're super excited about learning more about them and about you.
sure. Glad to be here. Thank you.
So let's start with the big picture. We hear a lot of buzz about smart buildings, but sometimes definitions can vary. Think about, lost in translation, if you will. But from your perspective, what really makes a building smart today versus just being tech enabled?
Well, it's good that you phrase it that way, right? Because smart versus tech enabled are two different things, and I've actually talked about this before, right? Devices, you could argue, have been connected for a long time, right? But it was a lot of manual intervention. You move from being able to do it locally to remotely, and then you started to group devices into things called scenes. Highly manual process, and I'd argue that devices didn't really work together, right? And now we're starting to move from what I would call connected devices to much more of a connected experience, and that's enabled by them being smart, right? They're doing things in concert together without every step and piece of it having to be spelled out by the end user.
A very well-rounded connected experience. That's a great
Yeah.
way to put it. Operators are under an immense pressure with the limited staffing, tighter margins, higher resident demands. How does building technology, especially the automation and AI part, directly support operational efficiencies?
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, right? Smart building technology faces two ways. It faces both the resident, right, and but then also the property. And from a property perspective, to your question, it really starts to add value when it delves into the workflows, right? I use an example of a leak detection, right? We identify something in the property that's leaking. It's going to consume a lot of water, or it's going to cause damage. A nice workflow is that it triggers a work order that goes to the contractor, who then shows up, gets a PIN code, can access the unit. All of those things working together now start to add a lot of value to the property. You can then extend that type of scenario to things like predictive maintenance around HVAC units or water pumps or what have you. You're starting to get great intelligence that then the building and the property can respond to without a whole lot of human intervention. And that drives great efficiency, great cost effectiveness, great return. And then, of course, that always boils down to NOI and net operating income for the property. So, Yeah.
Now those first 2 are definitely, a big deal, but, when it comes to the last one on, what you said about those turns and costs, that's obviously what our partners are really looking at. We did have a comment, so I just wanted to highlight and say hi to Mona Hussein, leasing consultant at FBI. She's just saying good day to us, so I'm excited to see her engagement, and thanks for listening in, Mona.
Yeah. Good to see you, Moet.
Yeah, so we hear and hear a lot about insurance costs being a huge issue for our industry and other industries, and back on the automation and AI point, being the front and center in today's smart building strategies, can you share where AI can be used to reduce manual workloads and maybe improve the operational efficiency across multifamily properties as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it is, I want to be clear, it's a developing area, right? And I'll say one of the nice things about being part of RealPage is RealPage at large, right? RealPage is larger than quote unquote just smart building. But RealPage at large is very, very focused on AI. We rolled out 5 AI agents not too long ago at a conference we hold, a users conference called Real World, right? A resident agent, a leasing agent, a finance agent, an operations and a facilities agent. And so the whole company's kind of oriented towards that. Therefore, you can kind of see down the road, if there's a facilities agent, there just might be at some point in time in the not too distant future a building agent that performs a role of connecting a lot of what takes place at a property level, software level, really to the physical aspects of the building, right? When you're controlling devices and you're controlling access and other types of things, and then connecting to HVAC units and water pumps, you're really taking, software and applying it to the physical layer. Sometimes we call it the nervous system of the building. And so, way back to the beginning of your first question, how are things evolving? You're moving from connected devices that are fairly dumb, don't work together, to ones that work together, to ones that are smart, that now perform multiple functions together on their own. Now you're getting to an agent that starts to actually do the whole thing entirely for you. And that means the property can come in on a Monday morning and maybe there were 10 problems that occurred over the weekend and they've been resolved, right? That's where we get to. And I think that's where we're headed here in the not too distant future.
It's very exciting to hear about an AI building agent or whatever we end up coining it, right? Because
Right.
I have recently transitioned into the agentic AI workforce industry principal here at RealPage, and it is a very unprecedented, exciting time to have these extra teammates for our partners. So we're really excited about. Thanks for sharing. So
Hey, can I
I
interject one
oh,
more thing
yeah,
as
yeah,
well,
absolutely,
Krista?
yeah,
If you don't mind, we'll just keep this light, interactive. There's also, we talk a lot about agents, but sometimes we forget just hardcore AI analytics, right? That start to manifest information to the property around things they can do, right? It's taking all this data, right? It's maybe predictive maintenance is a small version of it, right? But you're taking all this data, you're analyzing it in a way that is more efficient for a machine to do, and then saying, "Hey, here are some recommendations."
yes.
Not really agentic or agent, so to speak, but still taking that next step to the evolution. And I think that's important to outline as well, because sometimes you can paint a picture that's too far out there. We've got a lot of stuff we're doing right now today as well.
Yeah, no, and that's very true. I mean, it goes back to what we both said in the beginning of, things that get lost in translation. What's smart versus tech enabled, and what's actual here with AI, and what's our future state. So, very very well said, and thanks for keeping us to task there, Dennis. Um, so AI is increasingly being used to personalize resident experiences. So we're going to shift there and talk about that predictive maintenance on those smart thermostats. So how are smart buildings using AI to optimize resource consumption and empower residents to make those cost-saving decisions?
Well, it's interesting. We were just talking about kind of a property centric view. There is also the resident centric view, and I always like to use myself as an example. If we'd gone into the in-depth bio, I just got back from having spent 2 years in San Diego, and I was in I guess we would call it a mid-rise by definition, and we had smart thermostats, and we all got to participate in SDG&E's energy management program. All right.
Wonderful.
And that was viewed as being very valuable to myself as a resident and then to my peers throughout the building. Right. And so that was enabled by a smart thermostat that would do things like, hey, there's a energy management event that SDG&E wants to do today, and therefore we're going to give you points or value for pre-cooling your home, right, or your unit, so to speak, and avoiding peak usage, right. So that's an example of smart thermostats coming into play, and then there's also larger programs you can participate in. A full-blown what's called demand response program, right, where for that day the building itself is going to reduce its energy consumption. It can be overridden, but you start turning down air conditioning in common areas and those types of things. And so, and many residents, myself included, find that to be valuable, something that we want to participate in. Yeah, there's points, maybe there's rewards, but then kind of like recycle, at some point, it's also just the right thing to do, and we like to
Right.
be able to do that. Uh, and I'd also suggest as a corollary, when you talk about smart thermostats, there's also like water usage that falls into that same camp, right? Being able to identify when there's a running toilet, maybe not causing damage, but certainly consuming water. All of that comes to play as well, right? And so there's this resonant aspect of these smart devices that folks get pretty involved in.
Yeah, the cost effectiveness would really, drive the end result. But honestly, resident sentiment is growing. And I'm not going to say that it will ever peak because it is what they want in their community. And that would be one thing that I would really enjoy. I mean, not to go on a tangent here, but I was just in Philly visiting my dad. I stayed at a hotel, and every time we anticipated it being like a cool 70 degrees, and it was like a high 90 every day. It was awful. But we get into this old hotel and the thermostat kept kicking it down because we weren't present. So smart thermostats can help, but they also can hurt if you're not living there constantly. So yeah, that's a really great point. In the cost effectiveness, but also that resident sentiment and feeding into let's do better for our world. So I love
Absolutely.
that.
Sure. Sure.
And you mentioned, you living in San Diego, so I definitely want to touch on your sentiment, but as well as what we're hearing in the market in terms of those tech first experiences for residents. So think keyless entry or those app-based controls, much like what we were talking about with the thermostat, but seamless connectivity. When is my package arriving, and I can see it at the front door, those types of things. So how are smart buildings meeting or even shaping those resident expectations there?
Well, I mean, I guess this is somewhat of opinion, but it's also verified or supported by facts and numbers and percentages. And it's simply stated the smart building environment is becoming moving from perhaps a nice to have to a must have, right? Residents are making selections. Uh, Again, I mentioned again that I was in San Diego. I can tell you that that was part of my decision criteria, right?
Hmm.
Uh, the ability to enter the building without a key using uh, access methods that were keyless was pretty important to us as a family. And then similarly, being able to access and control the devices in the unit and access to the common areas, all of those things um, were really part of our decision to rent, right?
Hmm.
uh, and then frankly to renew for a second year. Um, Now I was there
Big
for a
deal.
2 year stint, so I wasn't there for a long, long time, but I could tell you that that was a part of my determination. And yeah, so it's with the theme of moving from a nice to have to a must have, right?
Yeah.
You're
Awesome.
competing with the business or with the I'm sorry with the building down the street who has a lot of these technologies.
Right.
That creates a demand, that creates a user preference, that all goes together.
For sure. So we do have a couple more comments. We have Bobby from BA Connects says greetings from Southern California. Not sure if
Oh,
you
hey, hey, hey. I
I
actually
know.
know you guys. Good to hear you.
And then Kevin, I would butcher last name. I'm going to try Kosher Burger. It says go Phils, which woohoo, go birds. To keep the engagement with our audience, let's go ahead and poll them and see what they think. What is the biggest driver for adopting smart building technology in your portfolio? Is it something like operational efficiency? Is it more closer to resident experience, maybe sustainability goals, or competitive differentiation? So just drop your answers in the chat. Also, please remember to ask your questions or just say hi by chatting us, and we'll be sure to address them while we're on the topics. We'd love to hear from you all.
Perfect.
Awesome. So I did want to share, we've been talking a lot about, the resident sentiment and, buildings coming online in terms of making sure that you have all of those great smart technologies. I just wanted to share some stats here. RealPage's latest study found that 79% of renters wanted that seamless connectivity throughout the property, and 62% expect Wi-Fi to work the moment they move in. But only 1% currently enjoy uninterrupted community-wide service, and I think that's a huge gap there. And I wanted to share that over 422,000 units of new multifamily are expected to be delivered in 2026 alone. So developers do have a major opportunity to get this right. So Dennis, how are operators approaching retrofit versus the new builds to close the connectivity gap and deliver that smart building experiences at scale?
Yeah, well, I think y- the the retrofit market is one that is growing rapidly, right? I think it's fair to say that smart building technology and the communications network upon which it rides was really a phenomenon of new builds for a long time. Um, but at the same time, this isn't mathematical. This isn't, I'm sure there's statistics that could be brought up, but I'll say it this way that, for every existing or brand new smart building that comes up out of the ground, there's probably 5 to 10. That's my experience on the same block that now need to compete with that newer building, right? And as we've gotten more experienced and more skilled, we've been able to identify ways to retrofit those buildings. Maybe a better word, we're actually discussing this internally, renovate those buildings, modernize their networks, all sorts of different words you can throw at it. But what you're really taking is a older building and bringing it up to modern, capabilities from a technology perspective, from a smart building perspective, from a connectivity perspective. And there's a drive to do that because again, you're trying to compete with that newer building down the street um, from a lease up perspective, but then also you're able to drive good, strong NOI on the back of that smart building and connective tissue.
Yeah. I mean, multifamily's been doing that for years. I mean, think about the espresso cabinetry when we started marketing that because everybody
Yeah.
wanted dark cabinets, right? Or, different laminate flooring. Like that we've been modernizing it in different ways. It's just we're kind of getting there when it comes to technology. So we're coming online for that. So we have had a lot of great feedback from our poll. Jennifer Downen from Ram Partners, she says hello from Georgia. But
Hello.
Mona, she said all of the above on our question or our poll question, which is very accurate. Didn't even give her that option, but she said all of the above. Katie Acuna said a competitive differentiator. So a lot like what you were just saying there, Dennis, making sure you're competitive to those that are up the street. Kevin, again, so sorry if I butcher your last name, Kuschberger of operational efficiency and competitive differentiation. So Jennifer from RAM said competitive differentiations. It is a lot. And then we have someone from resident relations specialist, Ursula Hodge says hello from Georgia. So thank you guys for that engagement. We really love hearing from you and hearing what really matters to you when it comes to that poll.
Yeah, and I think it highlights a couple of things, right? Really, it is, these technologies, when they're working well, benefit the property
Yes.
and benefit the resident, right? And those work together in harmony, and that leads to improved outcomes for both parties.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears just a smidge and talk about data. Now, it's everywhere. You talked about the analytics earlier,
Mhm.
but maybe not all data is actionable. How can operators leverage smart building data, whether from access systems, energy meters, or those sensors to make smarter, faster business decisions?
Yeah. So in my mind, it starts to move from analytics to, call it AI analytics and agentic AI and things we talked about at the top of the discussion, right? Where you're taking that data and without a whole lot of human intervention acting on it, right? Or as I also mentioned, making recommendations about what can be done. So um, I had one. I'm now, by the way, Boulder, Colorado, and I had my utility was running some analysis and realized that my water consumption had gone up over the last couple of days, right? And they actually reached out to me, which was pretty amazing for a
Yeah.
utility company, and asked me if something was wrong, right? Now, I could have gotten the reports and looked at the reports and analyzed them myself and gone online and done all this. But they basically said, hey, you're outside the norm of what you've been doing. Um, and you may have a problem. And I actually called, responded, and discussed with them, and then confessed, Krista, that I'd left my sprinkler on because there was a dry patch
Oh,
that I needed to correct and left it on overnight. But that's taking a ton of data. Just imagine all the reams of data across this entire town that I'm living in. And you can quickly build a multifamily corollary, right? Same thing, and instead of having to analyze all that data, it actually says, hey, here's an exception. Here's something going on. Do something about this, right?
yeah.
That's what we call actionable insights. And that's where you're taking the software, if you will, or the capability set, interfacing like a nervous system with the physical layer, and then saying, hey, you just stubbed your toe. You might want to stop that, right? You're not constantly getting bombarded with information. You're
Yeah.
getting with the information that you need to react to.
Yeah. Yeah. A call to action in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. So that's
Um,
my metaphor for that. I hope that
I
works.
like it. I
That's
like
how I
it.
think
No,
about it.
I'm gonna think of that next time. And then, we talk a lot about data. There's one lasting thing that always hits home to me when it comes to smart building technology, which is security. It's always been a concern. So, how is smart access control evolving, both to keep communities safe and to streamline the access for residents, guests, and even vendors? I mean, grocery deliveries and stuff like that is way more prevalent than was pre-COVID times.
Yeah. I think the way I would characterize it is the arena of smart access, security, control has expanded, right? So it's not just about securing the perimeter of the building, which is super important, right? But once somebody's inside the unit, right, or inside the building, I should say, what additional security is taking place, right? And so we have this concept of, we use the phrase sidewalk to sofa, right? So how do you securely let your DoorDash in the front door, up the elevator to your unit, ring the doorbell, get their tip, head out? To me, that is really a deeper manifestation of the need for security. And to do that, as you're transacting the entryway intercom, the entryway lock, the elevator access control, the perhaps the unit if you're actually dropping something off, which you can sometimes do with an Amazon package inside the unit, all sorts of different things. And then all of that needs to be monitored in an intelligent way that's not intrusive. But almost going back to the last question, has there been an exception that is a security concern, right? So it's blending all that together without having to be too intrusive and constantly present rather from a security perspective.
Yeah, because it's not like security is a top concern, but um, yeah, I like that. It was coining it more closer to the intrusive. Because yes, you want
Yeah,
security, but you also want to feel like this is my home. Not anybody can approach it at any given time. Not just from a safety, but like give me my personal space.
that's right. That's right. We all
Um,
like our privacy as well. So
exactly. So we had a comment from Adam Hepworth, founder at Della. He mentioned that resident experience is the catalyst. Without it, efficiency, sustainability, and differentiation collapse because unhappy residents can undo everything. So well
well said,
put.
Adam. And Adam and I
Thank you,
just met
Adam.
in the last few weeks, so I can
Did you?
personal
Perfect.
shout out to Adam.
Then we have Umair Ali in the prop tech industry. How do you address the challenges, initial capital cost that goes into smart home getaway and other smart devices? Not sure that that one can be answered, Dennis. We can skip over that, maybe get back to Umar, unless you ask.
Well, I mean, I would say everything is. It's math, right?
Yeah.
So, there's one part of our product we haven't talked a whole lot about, right? But that's managed Wi-Fi, right?
Right.
And part of what we do in that case is we offer the service to the property or portfolio of properties at a certain cost that gets marked up by the property, passed on to the resident, and there's direct cash tied to that as well. But then back to Adam's point, right? If you're offering a good resident experience, you could empirically show, and if we had more time, we could bring up those stats
Right.
that you can charge more for units in your building, right? You're going to have faster lease ups because residents are excited, right? And then you're going to operate that building more efficiently. All of those lead to, call it 5 or 10 points of improved margin associated with that. And I had someone say the other day, that results in EBITDA, and you do this right, you can actually get another turn on your multiple, right? So
Mhm.
there's real math to it, and it does pay off, and it's important not to lose sight of that because it's more than just for fun and giggles.
Yeah, and I think the way that I read that, it was more about the hardware side of it, because RealPage is in
Ah,
the software side, but I mean, Dennis, you've been around, a long time in the smart building technology, area, so, very well said, to Adam. Thank you for asking that. Or sorry, Umar. Then we have Ursula Hodge, resident relations specialist. And this is interesting because it really hits home. The reason why I was in Philly, I was visiting my dad, who is an aging adult. What about communities that cater to thriving seniors who might not be as computer savvy?
very interesting. So
Very interesting
this
question.
is a personal reaction to that, which is I actually think, and there's different names for it, and someone's going to correct me in terms of how I describe it, but those I'll call it aging communities, I think are ripe for today's smart building, right? The ones that took a lot of intervention and manual interaction, no. But as they've gotten more intelligent, as they do more things on their own and intuitively, frankly, I have the patience for it, and so I would expect others would have the patience for it, and therefore I think it's a lot more applicable in that kind of senior living type of scenario. And so I think it's highly applicable,
Yeah, for
and will
sure.
continue to be so. Yeah.
Fantastic. So this has been such an insightful conversation, Dennis. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and helping us understand not just the technology, but the real world impact of smart buildings in our industry. And for our listeners, whether you're an owner, manager, developer, or investor, the message is clear. Building smart isn't about chasing trends, it's about future proofing assets, streamlining operations, and creating connected communities. Thank you, everyone, for joining Multifamily Talks Live. We're excited to continue this series and offer up valuable conversations and topics you can expect monthly. Please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn for updates on upcoming live conversations. And we hope everyone enjoyed today's deep dive into smart building strategies and how to stay ahead. Thanks. See you next month.